What if I told you that getting drunk might be older than civilization itself? Older than writing, older than the wheel, older possibly than modern humans as we know them. Let's go back, way back. Not to ancient Egypt, not to Mesopotamia, further, to a time before humans even existed, when the first alcohol on Earth wasn't made by anyone at all. It just happened. Millions of years ago, ripe fruit fell from trees and started to rot. Wild yeast, floating invisibly in the air, landed on that sugary fruit and began to feast. As yeast breaks down sugar, it produces two things: carbon dioxide and ethanol, alcohol. This process is called fermentation, and it doesn't need humans to happen. It happens on its own in nature constantly. So animals in the forest, monkeys, elephants, even fruit flies, have been encountering naturally fermented fruit for millions of years. Some scientists believe this exposure was so consistent that it shaped our biology. There's a theory called the drunken monkey hypothesis, proposed by biologist Robert Dudley. It suggests that our primate ancestors evolved a strong attraction to the smell of ethanol because it was a reliable signal, overripe, sugary, calorie-rich fruit nearby. In other words, we may have been biologically primed to enjoy alcohol long before we ever brewed a single drop of it. Genetic research actually backs this up. Around 10 million years ago, a mutation appeared in the ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas. This mutation dramatically improved an enzyme called ADH4, making it far more efficient at breaking down ethanol. Some researchers believe this adaptation happened because our ground-dwelling ancestors were eating fermented fruit that had fallen to the forest floor. So in a very real sense, our bodies were adapting to alcohol long before Homo sapiens even existed. Now let's fast forward to actual humans. For most of prehistory, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. They didn't need to invent alcohol. They simply found it. Overripe fruit fermenting in the sun was an easy and appealing source of quick calories. Some researchers argue that early humans may have deliberately sought out fermented fruit, not just for the buzz, but because it was often softer, sweeter, and easier to digest than unripe fruit. But at some point, humans stopped just finding alcohol and started making it on purpose. This is where things get really interesting. For decades, the common assumption was that humans invented agriculture first, and beer came later, almost as a byproduct. But newer archaeological evidence has flipped that idea on its head for some researchers. At a site called Rakafet Cave in modern-day Israel, archaeologists discovered stone mortars dating back roughly 13,000 years, used by a hunter-gatherer culture known as the Natufians, a group that existed before farming as we know it. Chemical analysis of residue in these mortars showed signs consistent with brewing: wheat or barley that had been soaked, allowed to sprout, and then fermented. This was long before organized agriculture existed in the region. This discovery led some archaeologists to propose a bold idea, maybe the desire to produce alcohol, specifically for rituals, feasts, or social gatherings, was one of the very reasons humans began cultivating grain in the first place. In other words, maybe beer helped inspire farming, not the other way around. It's important to say this is a hypothesis, not settled fact, but it's a genuinely serious idea taken seriously in academic circles. Then, around 7000 BCE, we get some of the clearest, most concrete evidence of intentional alcohol production. At the site of Jiahu in China, archaeologists found pottery jars containing chemical residue from a fermented beverage made from rice, honey, and fruit. This is widely considered one of the earliest confirmed alcoholic beverages made by humans, predating even the famous beers of Mesopotamia by thousands of years. Speaking of Mesopotamia, by around 4000 to 3000 BCE, the Sumerians were brewing beer on a large scale. We know this because it's written down, literally. One of the oldest known written recipes in human history is the Hymn to Ninkasi, a Sumerian poem dedicated to the goddess of beer, which doubles as a step-by-step brewing guide. Beer wasn't just a drink to them. It was sacred, social, and in some cases, safer to consume than untreated water. So when you put it all together, alcohol's relationship with humanity isn't a single invention. It's a long, layered story. It starts millions of years ago with wild yeast fermenting fruit in the forest. It continues with our ancestors evolving bodies that could process ethanol efficiently. Then, tens of thousands of years ago, humans began deliberately fermenting grains, possibly even before farming itself. And finally, thousands of years ago, it became formalized, written down, worshipped, and embedded into the foundation of early civilization. Alcohol didn't just show up alongside human history. In many ways, it may have helped shape it. And honestly, that changes the way you look at a simple glass of beer.